What if I told you that the most feared warriors in history weren't buff dudes screaming on battlefields, but silent assassins who could kill you with a hat pin while you were mid-bite into your dinner, and that their entire philosophy was basically work smarter, not harder? We're talking about ninjas, not the movie version where they backflip through laser grids. Real ninjas. The ones who understood that ambition without strategy is just exhausting, and that being lazy in the right ways is actually a superpower. These shadow warriors built entire careers on doing the absolute minimum physical effort for maximum results. They were the original life hackers, turning espionage and assassination into an art form of efficient brutality. If you've ever wanted success, but hate the idea of grinding yourself into dust, the ninja approach might be your new religion. And if you stick around, I promise you'll learn why working like a maniac is actually the opposite of what smart people do. Plus, you'll get some disturbingly practical medieval murder techniques that I'm legally required to tell you not to try at home. Number 12, the art of strategic laziness. Imagine spending years training your body to be a weapon, only to realize the smartest move is not fighting at all. That was ninja philosophy in a nutshell. While samurai were out there having honorable duels and dying gloriously for their lords, ninjas were like, yeah, that sounds exhausting, and just poisoned the guy's tea instead. Here's the thing. Ninjas were peasants and lower-class warriors who couldn't afford fancy armor or noble bloodlines. They had to get creative, so they developed an entire combat system based on one question. What's the laziest way to win this? Turns out, the laziest way is usually the smartest way. Why risk your life in a sword fight when you could just set the enemy's camp on fire while they sleep? Why climb a wall when you could disguise yourself as a gardener and walk through the front gate? The ninja approach to ambition was pure efficiency. They studied their targets obsessively: routines, weaknesses, who they trusted, what they ate, when they pooped. Then they'd strike at the moment of maximum vulnerability with minimum effort. One well-placed shuriken beat 1,000 wild sword swings. One good disguise beat a battering ram. They understood something modern grind culture refuses to accept. Effort and results aren't the same thing. Western history loves to glorify the warrior who charges into battle screaming. Japanese ninjas literally laughed at that guy from the shadows, then strangled him with a wire while he was taking off his armor. The lesson? Ambition paired with intelligence beats ambition paired with brute force every single time. Basically, ninjas were the productivity gurus of feudal Japan, except instead of selling you a course, they'd just kill you and take your stuff. Number 11, the power of invisible work. You know what's wild? Most ninja missions involved zero fighting. Seriously. The majority of their job was information gathering, spying, eavesdropping, reading private documents, mapping enemy territory. They were basically medieval intelligence agencies, except way more likely to murder you if you caught them. This is where the lazy but brilliant part gets interesting. Ninjas realized that having the right information meant you barely had to do anything physical. Know where the guards patrol? You can slip past them. Know which advisor is corrupt? Blackmail them instead of fighting an entire army. Know when the warlord takes his morning bath? Well, that's when he's most vulnerable and also naked, which is both tactically advantageous and deeply uncomfortable for everyone involved. The ninja clans, particularly the famous Iga and Koga regions, turned espionage into a systematic science. They had networks of informants, coded messages, and elaborate disguises. A ninja might spend months working as a servant in an enemy household, doing nothing but observing. Then one day, boom! The lord mysteriously dies, and the servant vanishes like he was never there. This approach required patience, which lazy people actually have in abundance when they're avoiding hard work. Ninjas would rather wait 3 months for the perfect opportunity than risk a difficult frontal assault. They understood that doing nothing is sometimes the most productive thing you can do. Modern society tells you to take action constantly, but ninjas knew that premature action is just wasted energy. The invisible work, the watching, the listening, the planning, that was the real skill. The killing part was just the finale, and it usually took about 5 seconds. Imagine spending 90% of your time preparing and 10% executing. That's ninja efficiency. That's working smart, not hard. Medieval espionage was basically extreme introversion as a career path. Number 10. Disguise over dominance. Here's a fun fact that'll ruin every ninja movie for you. They didn't wear black pajamas. That iconic all-black outfit? Pure fiction, invented by Japanese theater. Real ninjas dressed like normal people, because, stay with me here, blending in is way easier than sneaking around in a conspicuous costume. Ninjas would disguise themselves as monks, merchants, farmers, entertainers, even beggars. They'd show up at your castle as a traveling musician, perform at your banquet, memorize your entire security layout, and leave. 3 weeks later, you're dead, and nobody suspects the flute player. This is peak lazy genius. Why develop superhuman stealth skills when you can just wear the right clothes and walk through the front door? The famous ninja manual called the Bansen Shukai literally has entire chapters on disguise techniques. It explains how to talk like different social classes, what tools each profession carries, even how to fake regional accents. Ninjas were method actors before method acting existed. They understood that people see what they expect to see. Dress like a peasant, act tired and stupid, and samurai guards won't give you a second glance. This strategy worked because feudal Japan had strict social hierarchies. A nobleman wouldn't really look at a servant's face. Servants were practically invisible. Ninjas exploited this ruthlessly. They'd infiltrate as the help, and suddenly they had access to private conversations, secure areas, even the Lord's bedchamber, all without throwing a single shuriken. The modern equivalent? Social engineering. Hackers who call your IT department pretending to be from corporate and get your password. That's ninja thinking. Why break through the firewall when you can just ask nicely? Why fight the bouncer when you can dress like you belong at the club? Dominance is loud and exhausting. Disguise is quiet and effective. Ninjas chose effective every time because they understood that looking dangerous is way less useful than being dangerous while looking harmless. Basically, the real ninja uniform was whatever makes you forgettable. Number 9. Weapons that required zero skill. Let's talk about ninja weapons, because this is where their lazy brilliance really shines. While samurai were spending decades mastering the katana, a weapon that requires insane skill, strength, and practice, ninjas were like, what if we just used poison instead? Ninjas loved weapons that did the work for them. Poison-tipped darts, blinding powders, explosive devices, caltrops, spiky things you throw on the ground so enemies can't chase you, smoke bombs, and even firearms once those showed up in Japan. These weren't honorable weapons. They were cheap, effective, and required minimal training. A farmer with 2 weeks of practice could kill a master swordsman with a poisoned needle. That's the entire ninja philosophy in one sentence. The kusarigama, a sickle with a chain attached, is a perfect example. It looks weird and impractical, but it was devastatingly effective because it gave you range without requiring you to be strong. You could trip someone with the chain, then finish them with the blade. You could fight from 10 feet away while they flailed around trying to reach you. It was the medieval equivalent of keeping your distance in a video game boss fight. Shuriken weren't meant to kill. They were distractions and deterrents. Throw a few, watch your enemy panic or cover their face, then run away or close in for the real attack. Ninjas didn't care about looking cool or fighting fairly. They cared about surviving and completing the mission with minimum risk. Even the famous ninja sword was shorter and less refined than a katana, because ninjas didn't plan on getting into extended sword fights. Their blade was a backup weapon for emergencies, not their main tool. If a ninja was actually sword fighting you, something had gone terribly wrong with their plan. The lesson here is beautiful. Invest in tools that multiply your effectiveness without multiplying your effort. A poisoned dart does the same job as a sword, but requires 1% of the skill. That's not cheating. That's intelligence. Medieval arms races were basically who can find the most unfair advantage, and ninjas won by not pretending to care about fairness. Number 8. The strategy of running away. You want to know the most important ninja skill? Running. Seriously. Escape techniques were considered more valuable than fighting techniques because a dead ninja completes 0 missions. While Western culture glorifies standing your ground and fighting to the death, ninjas were like, or we could just leave and come back when you're asleep. Ninjas trained extensively in parkour-like movement, climbing, jumping, swimming, navigating difficult terrain in the dark. Not to chase people, but to escape. They studied castle layouts obsessively, so they'd know every exit. They carried smoke bombs specifically for covering retreats. They'd set traps and distractions to slow down pursuers. The entire system was built around the idea that survival beats pride. There's a famous story about a ninja named Ishikawa Goemon who got caught trying to assassinate a warlord. Before they executed him, he allegedly said his only regret was getting caught, not that he tried. That's the mindset. Failure is fine. Death is permanent. You can't complete your mission if you're corpse decorating someone's castle wall. This strategic cowardice drove samurai absolutely insane. Samurai culture was obsessed with honor, dying gloriously, never showing your back to the enemy. Ninjas thought that was the dumbest thing they'd ever heard. Why would you die for pride when you could live and try again tomorrow? The mission mattered more than ego. Modern application. Knowing when to quit, pivot, or retreat isn't weakness. It's tactical thinking. The grind set culture tells you to push through everything, but sometimes the smart move is to step back, reassess, and attack from a different angle. Ninjas built entire careers on this principle. Running away from a bad situation doesn't mean you lost. It means you live to fight smarter next time. If your enemy is stronger, faster, or better equipped, why would you engage on their terms? Change the battlefield, change the rules, or just don't play that round. Basically, discretion wasn't the better part of valor for ninjas. It was the entire strategy. Number 7, patience as a weapon. Here's something that'll blow your mind. Some ninja missions took years, literal years. A ninja might get assigned to infiltrate a household, so they'd move to that town, establish a fake identity, work a normal job, make friends, slowly gain trust, and only after months or years would they make their move. That's not laziness. That's patience weaponized to a terrifying degree. The Iga and Koga ninja clans understood something profound. Rushing is how you get caught. They'd plant sleeper agents in enemy territories who would just live there. These people had cover identities so deep that even their neighbors didn't suspect anything. Then one day, decades later, they'd activate, and suddenly, critical information was flowing, or a key figure mysteriously died. This approach required almost superhuman patience, but here's the lazy part. Once you're embedded, the actual work is minimal. You're just existing in that space, observing, waiting. No exhausting battles, no risky infiltrations every night. You're playing the long game, and the long game is way less strenuous than constant action. You water the garden, chat with the locals, and occasionally write coded messages. That's it. Compare this to the Western spy model of dramatic missions and constant danger. Ninjas thought that was inefficient and stupid. Why risk exposure with frequent operations when you could risk nothing by simply being patient? The best intelligence comes from people who've been watching for so long, they're part of the furniture. Modern parallels exist everywhere. The most successful people often aren't the ones frantically networking and hustling every day. They're the ones who built relationships slowly over years, positioned themselves strategically, and waited for the right moment. That startup founder who seems to suddenly succeed, usually they spent 5 years positioning themselves before anyone noticed. Ninjas understood that timing matters more than effort. You can work incredibly hard at the wrong moment and achieve nothing, or you can do very little at exactly the right moment and change everything. The key is knowing the difference, which requires observation and patience, not hustle. The mission that takes 3 years but succeeds is better than the mission that takes 3 days but fails. That's math, not philosophy. Number 6, Psychological warfare over physical combat. Let's talk about how ninjas messed with people's heads, because this might be their most brilliant, lazy strategy. Why fight someone when you can make them so terrified they defeat themselves? Ninjas deliberately cultivated their mystique. They spread rumors about supernatural powers, walking on water, becoming invisible, controlling animals, predicting the future. Obviously, they couldn't actually do these things, but the legends served a purpose. If your enemies think you're a demon who can appear anywhere, they're already scared. Scared people make mistakes. They see shadows everywhere. They trust no one. They exhaust themselves with paranoia. There are documented cases of ninja leaving calling cards, a specific flower, a marked kunai, a coded message, just to let their target know they'd been there. Not to kill them yet, just to say I could have. Imagine lying in bed, knowing an assassin snuck into your room, stood over you while you slept, and chose to let you live. For now. That psychological torture is worse than death for some people. The famous nightingale floors that Japanese castles installed, floors designed to squeak when walked on, were specifically anti-ninja technology. That's how scary ninjas were. Lords spent fortunes on architecture to detect footsteps because they couldn't sleep, knowing a ninja might be creeping around. The ninjas barely had to do anything. The fear did most of the work. This strategy requires almost zero physical effort. You're not fighting, you're just being creepy and strategic. You leave evidence of your presence. You spread rumors. You let people's imaginations run wild. Their own fear becomes your weapon, and fear doesn't sleep, doesn't take breaks, and works 24/7 without you lifting a finger. Modern application, reputation and perception management, your brand, your mystique, your reputation. These things work for you even when you're not in the room. Building an aura of competence or danger means people treat you differently without you doing anything. That's leveraged effort. Ninjas knew that the scariest weapon isn't a blade, it's uncertainty. When people don't know what you're capable of, their imagination fills in details way worse than reality. Basically, psychological warfare is the ultimate lazy strategy because your enemy defeats themselves while you watch. Number 5. Collaboration over solo heroics. Here's where ninjas really flipped the script on Western hero mythology. They almost never worked alone. While movies show lone wolf assassins, real ninjas operated in teams, clans, and networks. Because, and this is crucial, relying on other people means you personally have to do less work. The Aiga and Koga regions had entire communities of ninja families. Multiple generations would train together, develop specialized skills, and support each other's missions. One person might be the disguise expert, another specialized in poisons. Someone else handled codes and communications. You didn't need to be good at everything. You just needed to be good at your thing, and trust your team for the rest. This is peak efficiency. Why spend years mastering every skill when you can master one and collaborate with specialists? A solo ninja has to be mediocre at 20 things. A team of ninjas each excels at 4 things, and combined, they're unstoppable. Plus, if one person gets caught or killed, the mission continues. Redundancy built into the system. Ninja clans also maintain civilian networks. Merchants who'd pass messages, farmers who'd hide them, monks who'd provide alibis. These support structures meant a ninja on a mission could call in favors, get local intelligence, or disappear into a community. They weren't isolated warriors. They were nodes in a larger network. That network did most of the heavy lifting. Compare this to the samurai ideal of individual honor and solo achievement. Samurai fought alone to prove their worth. Ninjas fought in coordinated teams because they cared about winning, not proving anything. The samurai's ego was a weakness ninjas exploited constantly. Modern lesson: your network is your net worth, and collaboration beats competition almost every time. The most successful people aren't usually solo geniuses. They're connectors who know how to leverage other people's expertise. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You need to be in the room with smart people. Ninjas understood that true power comes from relationships and systems, not individual capability. A mediocre ninja with great allies beats a master ninja with none. Feudal Japan's most feared warriors basically invented networking as a survival strategy. Number 4. Minimalist training philosophy. You'd think ninjas trained like crazy, right? Wrong. Their training was brutally efficient, but not excessive. They didn't believe in training for training's sake. Every skill had to have direct mission application. No wasted effort, no showing off, no unnecessary complexity. Ninja children started young, but the training focused on practical skills: climbing, swimming, observation, disguise, basic weapons. They learned enough to be dangerous, not enough to become masters. The goal was competence across multiple areas, not perfection in one. A ninja who was decent at 10 things was more valuable than one who'd spent years perfecting the sword. This contradicts modern self-improvement culture that tells you to hustle harder, practice more, become the absolute best. Ninjas would say that's inefficient, unless being the best directly serves your goal. Good enough is usually good enough. Perfectionism wastes time you could spend on mission-critical tasks. They also emphasized mental training, observation, memory techniques, staying calm under pressure, reading people. These skills multiply the effectiveness of physical abilities. A ninja with average fighting skills but excellent observation could avoid fights entirely. A ninja with good memory could recall complex castle layouts after one visit. These mental skills required less physical strain than constant combat training. The famous ninjutsu training manuals don't obsess over technique perfection. They're more like practical guides. Here's how to pick a lock. Here's how to tell if someone's lying. Here's 3 ways to start a fire quickly. It's all about utility, not mastery. Learn what works. Practice until reliable. Move on. Modern parallel. The 80-20 rule. 20% of your skills produce 80% of your results. Ninjas intuitively understood this centuries ago. They trained the high-impact skills and ignored the rest. They'd rather be competent generalists than specialized masters, because missions required adaptability. You don't need to be the best. You need to be good enough at the right things. And ninjas proved that competence beats excellence when strategy is involved. Training smart beats training hard, and training exactly what you need beats training everything. Number 3, exploit systems, don't fight them. This is where ninja philosophy gets deeply relevant to modern life. Ninjas were masters at finding loopholes in existing systems, rather than confronting those systems head-on. Feudal Japan had rigid social structures, strict protocols, predictable routines, and ninjas exploited every single one. Castle security followed patterns. Guards changed shifts at specific times. Gates opened for specific people. Nobles followed court etiquette that made them predictable. Instead of trying to overcome these systems through force, ninjas studied them until they found the gaps. They'd bribe the gate guard instead of climbing the wall. They'd forge documents instead of sneaking past checkpoints. They'd exploit the servant entrance that nobody guarded because servants were considered harmless. This approach required intelligence and research, not strength. A ninja might spend weeks learning a castle's routines just to discover that the kitchen staff entered through an unguarded door at dawn. Boom! That's your entry point. No dramatic wall climbing, no fighting guards, just walking through a door that the system itself left open. The same logic applied to social systems. Feudal Japan's class hierarchy was oppressive but predictable. Ninjas would disguise themselves as appropriate social classes, and suddenly rules that applied to everyone else didn't apply to them. A monk could travel freely. A merchant could ask questions without suspicion. The system's own rules became tools for subversion. Modern application is everywhere. Every bureaucracy, company, or institution has official rules and unofficial gaps. The people who succeed aren't always the ones working hardest. They're the ones who understand which rules matter and which ones are just theater. They know who actually makes decisions versus who has the fancy title. They find the shortcuts that technically aren't against the rules, just against convention. Ninjas would look at modern corporate structures and immediately identify the informal power networks, the unguarded access points, the predictable patterns. They'd befriend the executive assistant who controls the calendar instead of trying to impress the executive. They'd use the system's own mechanisms against itself. Fighting the system requires enormous energy and usually fails. Understanding the system and exploiting its inherent weaknesses, that's ninja thinking. That's working smarter. Every system has cracks. The lazy genius finds them instead of battering against the walls. Number 2, information over action. Here's the most important lesson from ninja philosophy, and it's going to sound anticlimactic. They valued intelligence gathering above everything else. The actual assassination, sabotage, or whatever, that was the easy part. The hard part was knowing exactly what to do, when, and how. And hard here means time-consuming but not physically demanding. A typical ninja mission was maybe 5% action and 95% intelligence work. They'd spend months researching their target, daily routines, relationships, weaknesses, fears, allies, enemies, favorite foods, sleep patterns, literally everything. By the time they acted, success was almost guaranteed because they'd engineered a situation where failure was nearly impossible. This is the opposite of how most people approach challenges. We tend to take action first and figure things out as we go. Ninjas thought that was insane. Action without information is just chaos with extra steps. Every move should be calculated based on comprehensive knowledge. If you don't know enough to guarantee success, you don't move yet. The Bansen Shukai dedicates entire sections to intelligence gathering techniques, how to observe without being noticed, how to cultivate informants, how to verify information, how to analyze patterns. These weren't optional skills. They were the core competency. A ninja who couldn't gather intelligence wasn't a ninja, just a poorly trained assassin. This philosophy extends beyond missions. Ninjas gathered intelligence on everything: regional politics, trade routes, weather patterns, crop yields, economic conditions. Information was power, and power meant leverage. They could sell information, use it for blackmail, or simply position themselves advantageously. The clans that survived longest were the ones with the best intelligence networks. Modern equivalent, due diligence, market research, competitive analysis, networking for information rather than opportunities. The entrepreneurs and investors who succeed aren't usually the ones taking the biggest risks. They're the ones who did enough research to know which risks are actually safe bets. They have information asymmetry, which is just a fancy way of saying they know something you don't. Ninjas understood that in any competitive situation, the person with better information wins. Not the stronger person, not the more aggressive person, the better informed person. Information reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is where effort gets wasted. You can work incredibly hard in the wrong direction if you don't know where you're going. Information is the compass that makes laziness strategic. Number 1, the mission over the ego. Here's the ultimate ninja lesson, the one that ties everything together. They subordinated their egos completely to mission success. No glory seeking, no reputation building, no proving themselves. If the mission required them to run away, they ran. If it required them to dress as a beggar and get spat on, they did it. If it required waiting 10 years, they waited. The job mattered, their feelings didn't. This is radically different from samurai culture, which was entirely about honor, reputation, and ego. A samurai would rather die than lose face. A ninja didn't have a face to lose because they were literally faceless, hidden, anonymous, unconcerned with how history would remember them. Most ninjas' names are lost to history because they specifically avoided fame. This egoless approach made them incredibly effective. Ego makes you predictable. Ego makes you take unnecessary risks. Ego makes you choose the flashy option over the effective option. Ninjas had none of those handicaps. They could do whatever worked, no matter how unglamorous, because they weren't performing for anyone. The famous ninja saying, "The nail that sticks out gets hammered down," wasn't about conformity. It was about survival through invisibility. Don't stand out. Don't seek credit. Do the work, complete the mission, disappear. Your reward is survival and payment, not fame. This mindset is almost impossible for modern people to grasp because we're trained to build personal brands, seek recognition, and make ourselves visible. But there's power in invisibility. There's freedom in not needing external validation. When you don't care about credit, you can focus entirely on results. Ninjas proved that anonymity can be more valuable than fame, that effectiveness matters more than recognition, and that the people working behind the scenes often have more power than the ones in the spotlight. They were the ultimate pragmatists. If it worked, it was right. If it failed, it was wrong. No philosophical debate, no justification, just results. The lazy genius aspect? When you're not wasting energy on ego management, worrying what people think, building your image, defending your reputation, you have so much more capacity for actual work. Ego is exhausting. Letting it go is liberating and efficient. Basically, ninjas understood that the most powerful person in the room is often the one nobody's looking at. So what's the lesson here? If history teaches us anything through the example of ninjas, it's that intelligence beats effort, strategy beats strength, and patience beats aggression almost every single time. The grind culture we worship today, the constant hustle, the performative busyness, the glorification of exhaustion, ninjas would have thought that was the dumbest way to live. Real ambition isn't about working yourself to death. It's about working smart enough that you don't have to work hard. It's about building systems, leveraging other people's strengths, gathering information, and waiting for the perfect moment. It's about doing the minimum necessary to achieve maximum results, which sounds lazy, but is actually the highest form of strategic thinking. And maybe that matters today more than ever. We live in a world that tells you more effort always equals more success. But ninjas prove that's not true. Sometimes less effort with better strategy equals exponentially better results. Sometimes the person who looks like they're doing nothing has actually positioned themselves so perfectly that success is inevitable. The ninja's legacy isn't just about assassination techniques or espionage tactics. It's about a fundamentally different approach to achievement, one that values intelligence over effort, preparation over action, and results over recognition. That philosophy worked for centuries in one of history's most competitive, dangerous environments. Maybe it has something to teach us about navigating our own. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.